Hi, Flask again. Remember that Steam Next Fest? Happened mid-June? Well, I played so many demos from it that this here is part 2 of my impressions and thoughts on the ones that I found noteworthy. Voyagers of Nera is a Polynesian-themed survival crafting game, up to 10 players. Me and some of the guys that tend to play this genre gave it a try, together. It's still got a ways to go to be very captivating, but it's fundamentally sound enough, and has some interesting things going for it, like the focus on building a boat and sailing to different islands in the archipelago. It reminded me of the sailing in Valheim, and it's kind of fun to have one person control the sail and one person control the rudder. We definitely ignored some of the intended progression that would have prepared us better in order to, race to the mission objectives for the sake of the demo. But there's a very clear path forward to get as ready as you can before you go sailing off into the blue yonder looking for, deadly ruins. The combat, crafting, and building are standard. There's no climbing. If we're being real, pretty much everything here is standard. It's mostly the setting that could make it at least worthwhile experiencing. Strange Antiquities is a lightly dark, cozy puzzle game where you're a thaumaturge's apprentice running a shop of occult antiquities, totems, charms, pendants, etc. It's a sequel to Strange Horticulture, which saw you running an herbalist shop, so we're exchanging the magic of plants for the magic of occult items. I quite enjoyed Strange Horticulture, so playing this demo was more of an indulgence for myself than any real test. It's good, as expected. You welcome multiple customers in each day. They'll ask for a certain type of item to help them in some way. You consult your big book, and then peruse the shelves to find the item that matches certain descriptors. You use your different senses to pick up on those attributes. For instance, a horned object might feel worn by rubbing fingers, or a ring might emit the sound of a snake's hiss. Normal stuff like that. If you get it wrong enough times, you have to play a dice rolling minigame to break some hold of fear over yourself. You also have the town map, from which you can explore a number of locations. You'll periodically get letters from people at certain locations, informing you of an interesting item they found, perhaps, which you can then go retrieve during the day. Anyway, this looks to be more of what made Horticulture good, so I'm looking forward to its release. Panta Rhei is an isometric action-adventure roguelike. You play as a young apprentice to the Guardian of the Past, named Phi, and in the opening their mentor is killed by a purple monster energy, so they must take up the mantle and explore the realm of time to do something with time. And time plays a big role not only in the story, but in the gameplay too. Your health constantly ticks down during enemy encounters, and you have a few hourglasses that act as lives. You also get a special ability to reverse time for a short burst, which lets you re-trigger attacks on enemies and get out of bad spots. Some enemies and walls will also have a sort of shield that only time-reversed attacks can break through. Like I said, it's also a roguelike, so you'll find upgrades that you can apply and stack in your ability slots. For instance, I bolstered my rolling basic attack combo and then put a boon on that to increase my speed after a successful strike. Overall, it's a competent one of these. I'm not blown away, but neither am I in any way disappointed. The most contentious aspect might be the constant health drain, so I'll be interested to see how you mitigate that further into the game. LAN Party Adventures is a simulator of being a teen in the year 2000 who's installing a new computer. I don't know what happens beyond that because the game crashed every time I tried to put a power strip down. This was a repeatable bug. It was neat to walk around the bedroom and look at the legally distinct posters and games, though. Thief's Shelter is a 3D point-and-click adventure game. It's about a detective investigating the death of a recluse at a mansion, but the detective is also contending with his own dementia and the hallucinations he's suffering on account of that. This one's really only noteworthy to me because it's so hokey in its presentation, but in kind of a delightful way. It reminds me of 3D adventure games from the 2000s, because it has such ambition that it can't really realize in practice. There's a certain charm to its low-budget environmental dressing and its English as a second language dialogue that some niche lovers of the genre might enjoy. I honestly don't even want to speak on the gameplay mechanics because there's problems. I wouldn't go into this expecting good, but I don't want to say we might be able to expect so bad it's good, but maybe this game will have an alternative appeal, you know?
I need some type of key.
Brew is a third-person action roguelike game involving shooting, melee, throwables, and brewing elemental potions on the fly to affect all aforementioned attack types in different ways. The game is really cutesy with its animal characters and cartoony art style, but I found it actually pretty challenging. Maybe I was being too reckless, but also there were minor details about the combat that I found frustrating. You are an oft-failing apprentice magician who has been accepted to Alchemy Academy, and the runs take the form of you trying to pass exams. So you face room after room of clockwork enemies, capped with upgrades to your skills or new abilities, and connected by choices of rooms like a shop, an upgrade room, healing, etc. And even if you fail, you've assuredly collected the currency of corks in that run, which let you buy things in the academy. That, plus you can get permanent stat tree upgrades from a crystal ball outside. The main gimmick of combat is that, as I said, you're brewing one of a few potions on the fly. Fire, air, water. You can then apply those either to your gun, your melee, or use it as a throwable grenade. And each of those applications does different things. But yeah, I don't know what about the gameplay just didn't feel wonderful to me. On the surface it should be good, and I like the systems. Was it that you have to pause onto a separate wheel to craft potions, which you collect the ingredients for from enemy loot or environmental breakables? Was it that the gun needs to reload every few shots? Was it that the melee is like a canned animation that needs to reset? Was the dash not long enough? Am I just feeling the intended grind of the early game without many upgrades? Because the game's themes are about persistence in the face of failure? It's possible. Any of those are possible reasons. It's also notable that the only way to recover health is by chance, in one of the roguelite dice rolls along the way. Whatever the case, I'm not giving up on this game just from my experience here. I might be bad, or the game might have issues, but I don't think the game is bad. Project Structure 01 is a first-person atmospheric exploration game. First of all, trippy opening credits sequence. Then the brutalist monochrome megastructure you're crawling through is no less trippy, really. You're some kind of glowing energy person running through corridors, bridges, and hanging installations, all in pursuit of what, I don't know. There are hidden collectible ducks in every level, though. I found a message on a wall at one point that alluded to the ducks causing everything to go downhill. And another message makes mention of the green fungi growing in the water system. Aside from those scant clues, you're just running and running. Frankly, the amount of running really wore on me. I think that's intentional, but I did not feel it was enjoyable. It is honestly impressive, the scale of the levels and their design, the way the game often utilizes blind corners and harsh shadows, where things are only revealed when you're close. The game also wants to spook you a little bit, given the few appearances of shadowy figures with glowing eyes. It just didn't really work for me in a way that felt other than wearisome. I felt tired and bored by minute 20, even with the levels technically keeping the layout fresh, so I more admired the demo in concept than in play. With that said, maybe the full package will make it all feel better somehow. I'm not ruling that out. Mythrealm is a third-person RPG adventure. Might also be called a dungeon crawler. Very meaty demo here. I played about 50 minutes before I had to stop it unfinished. And it's releasing to early access, so their content plan may be ambitious. That's one of the words I'd use to describe this game. Ambition. That and earnestness, from the opening voiceover to the letters you find throughout the world. There's a sense of wanting to make a straightforward, Scrolls-like, Souls-like RPG, with few unnecessary frills, and I think they're pulling it off. Opening tutorial forest where you can learn about swordsmanship, archery, and magic. Into the requisite goblin cave, of course. From there into the castle dungeon, full of zombies and skeletons. All classic, picking up loot and equipment. There are also rune stones that act as healing and respawn points, but respawn enemies as well when you sit at them. My biggest surprise was just how much platforming plays a part in the game, and non-trivial platforming at that. You'll often be leaping from pedestal to pedestal, and mantling ledges. The climax of the Goblin Cave is a whole extended vertical scaling of uneven rocky protrusions and cliffs. I'm real into how much it's integrated. The jump does feel floaty, but once you acclimate, you realize it can be very dynamic if used well. The only other thing I'll mention is that I never quite got the hang of how melee combat is supposed to work, I don't think. There's a directional system, but in practice I mostly ended up blocking, dodging, strafing, or just plain backing away while hacking at the enemy. Same went for the ranged options, as far as the backing away goes. If there's more to it that would have made me more effective, I didn't understand. But I had no real criticisms. We'll see what the full thing looks like in the future, because I think the mechanical infrastructure holds a lot of promise. Morbid Metal is a third-person sci-fi hack-and-slash action roguelite. I didn't play a terribly long amount of the demo, but not because I wasn't enjoying it. On the contrary, it's a solid entry in this genre with solid systems to learn. I was just sucking enough at it that I was like, I get what this game's about, and I like it, so I think I'll move on for now. To the point I got in the demo, I'd unlocked 2 characters that I could switch between on the fly, even mid-combat. First guy is a quick-strike samurai swordsman. Second guy is a cleaver-crushing heavy who can launch enemies into the air and do nice AoE. You have 2 skills per character in addition to your basic attack, and you build meter for a special high damage move. Another big element is how perfect dodges allow exploiting strikes, so you want to get good at that. Like I said, it's a roguelite, so after every arena clear, you get an upgrade. There are also optional deals with the devil that give you a boon that comes with some negative effect. For instance, I took one that let me do 200% more damage if I took 200% more damage, which almost immediately proved fatal when I started recklessly taking damage like a dummy. This is good stuff, and I'm excited to see what the other characters are like and how you can play with those synergies. Toy Escape is a third-person toy soldier climbing platformer game, which can be played cooperatively. You're a little toy soldier in a big garage with a whole linear path of junk to climb and fall off of. There are checkpoints along the way that you can respawn at, parachutes, apparently, and the end of the demo indicated that you'd be climbing up through the whole house, pretty much. I played this with some friends, and we pretty unanimously agreed that the game is lackluster. It technically does deliver on its premise and setting, with gameplay that works alright, but it felt somewhat rough, and more importantly, it just wasn't very interesting. Especially playing a lot of Peak recently, this one just doesn't have much going for it. I don't even really like Only Up or Chained Together myself, but I'm not sure even diehards of those games would find what they're looking for here in its simplicity. But if you're after a relatively chill version of those, maybe then. Aside from Greg crashing once, and me getting the settings menu stuck on screen, it didn't seem broken in a meaningful way, so you can play it. The Oily Depths is a first-person, creepy-tinged, deep-sea submersible oil drilling simulator. You're commanded by a voice over the loudspeaker to get to work every day, It controls the doors and your supply of oxygen. You have to meet a quota of oil per day, or there will be consequences. The gameplay consists of piloting your vessel towards the next potential oil well, using a wheel and accelerator. You have a 2D map and a distance meter to help navigate. If you hit anything, you might spring a leak that you have to go fix with a hammer manually, or there may be fires to extinguish. Then when you're at the marked location, you go to the drill. You get a list of layers, either the drill head or the suction head, respectively. For each layer, you pull the machine down, lock it in with 2 clamps, and hit the button. Reverse the process when you get to the next incompatible layer. Switch heads, lock in, you get the idea. There's also a pressure gauge that you have to keep an eye on, and periodically use a lever to vent. It's a simple procedure of managing these systems in the demo, and in the demo's day 1, the voice sets a time limit until you run out of oxygen because you hadn't hit your oil quota, and then the next day you wake up and everything's on fire, and then the demo's over. Hopefully the game makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts, because the core procedure is not in itself very entertaining. I'm sure that's thematically the point, but themes don't make it fun, so I'd like it to develop as you go, and had the story, such as there is one, make it feel justified. The Hilltop Funeral is a single-player or co-op, pallbearing physics platformer. It's basically the challenge of carrying a corpse in a casket across extremely uneven territory, except the casket is open and the body has very floppy, slippery physics. The visual style is black and white, sort of cartoony. You are bearing through nighttime graveyards, woods, and stone structures. I tried this demo with Greg, and it just didn't click for us. I hesitate to go all out and say it was a bad time, but it kinda was. The carrying is fairly understandable, with the ability to turn, tilt, and jump. But the physics of the body and the way the terrain interacts with you and it is just so unpredictable and frustrating. Greg called that body buttery, and he wasn't wrong. Honestly, I expected it to be a lot more learnable than it was, and I figured the game would ramp up the challenges you face. But from moment 1 to moment quit, it just felt like control was a suggestion. Maybe the single player is somehow a lot better. I was not inclined to try it out after my experience. Super 10-Pin is a retro-style bowling game, very much an homage to N64 titles specifically. I know there have been bowling titles for PC from that sort of Y2K era, like Hyper Bowl, which I only know because LGR covered it. But I'm not at all familiar with N64 bowling, so I looked it up, and maybe Milo's Astro Lanes could be considered similar, but it reminded me most of Hyper Bowl. And the lane levels reminded me a lot of levels that you'd see in arcade racers at the time. Just delicious aesthetics. Really, the whole thing is delectable if you have nostalgia for that era. The controls made sense to me, though it takes some learning. You can guide the ball as it goes down the lane, and you'll very easily over or understeer if you don't have a deft hand. Plus, the lanes start out simple and quickly get complex. Sometimes you have to make curves, sometimes the lanes have gimmicks, so it feels like you're playing a mini golf game almost. You also get different balls that have different attributes. My favorite was the bouncy ball, that I needed to bounce into an automatic strike-scoring star during a loop-de-loop. As I said, it gets complex. But for its craziness, it's still a chill time that, if you can get into it, will make you zone out and just keep trying again and again. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some ludicrous tricks you can pull off with combos of ball choice and lane knowledge. Speaking of which, the full game promises 50 lanes, so there could be a heck of a lot to learn. As sort of a little juxtaposition to the Hilltop Funeral, Gloomy Eyes is a self-co-op puzzle adventure game where you play as 2 children working their way around and through diorama-esque levels to get to the end. You solve environmental puzzles along the way, and you can zoom out and rotate the camera around the level to better see the lay of the land, or hunt for secrets. The boy is a zombie, damaged by light, who's escaping a graveyard at the beginning. The girl is a precocious investigator trying to escape her uncle and find the sun. And I think that's their overall goal in the game, to bring back the sun. The demo doesn't cover the actual self-co-op gameplay, but the levels you do as the individual kids are enjoyable. The visual style is reminiscent of Henry Selick or Tim Burton's stop-motion art styles, as the Steam description readily admits. It has a very charming look and design, and the children's story is narrated by a pleasant Irish gravekeeper, who you can meet in person early on. I would use the word charming to describe it overall, at least I found it to be, as a sucker for anything Halloween-y. And hey, no specific release date, but maybe that's when I'll be playing it later this year, October. Editing Flask here with breaking 6-year-old news. This appears to be a follow-up to a Gloomy Eyes VR animated movie from 2019 or 2020 that starred Colin Farrell as the aforementioned pleasant Irish narrator of the story of these two same kids. I don't know if this is a sequel or a reimagining, but I guess I gotta watch that first. Colin Farrell had really high praise for it, and he was in After Yang and Dumbo. I don't think he's reprising his role for the game, by the way, if only because I imagine that they would be advertising that fact on marketing materials. Voidbreaker is a roguelite FPS with a focus on environmental destruction. It's set in a combat simulation that's using you as a hapless test subject to iterate an algorithm over and over. You're subjected to this repeatedly by a menacing HAL 9000 tower, but you find that there's a former test subject, now deceased but still alive in the wires, who wants to help the both of you escape. So by the standard rules of the sim, you'll be going through a board game series of areas that can contain combat arenas, equipment loot, or other things that affect your abilities. But there's also the red, hacky sort of aid that your friend is giving, like unlocking guns you shouldn't strictly have, or boosting your skills through cheating. The combat is fast-paced shooting action against robots, and you do have a melee. You also have grenades, and you can throw objects around you. Both of those thrown things can destroy buildings, and the debris from the destruction can stun enemies. So you want to constantly be moving, throwing stuff to break the environment, shooting enemies when they're stunned. You also get a lot in the way of mods, upgrades to your firearm, like elemental bullets, and you can get secondary skills like an acid attack, for instance. You equip these in a synergistic grid system where certain spaces can also affect adjacent spaces, like shutting them down, opening them up, doubling their effect, etc. It's much more interesting than simply equipping and swapping for bigger numbers. This game is being made by a single developer, so good job to Daniel, because it's fun so far. Breaking the Void is something I find I'd like to do. Mystery of the Malign is a mystery detective game with a visual style reminiscent of old PC puzzlers from the turn of the millennium. The demo warns you up front that you may not be able to solve anything major with the clues provided, and indeed I played about 45 minutes and had exhausted every clue I could think of after thorough exploration. So this demo was more about getting a taste of the game's flavor than about being a solvable slice of puzzle. You're a man named Christopher, who's part of a duo that may be supernatural private investigators. Whatever they are, they hire themselves onto the case of a woman who was allegedly attacked on the grounds of a museum at night, and made the news for her subsequent hysteria. The first part of the demo is going to her apartment and using context to figure out which apartment she's in, and then you travel to the museum and look around its grounds for physical evidence. You can also interrogate people like the museum's gardener or the victim herself. I like the aspect that, in addition to your investigative partner, you also bring along your overly imaginative wife and your dog. They can all come into play. Your dog can even sniff certain samples you collect. The mystery solving itself utilizes a system similar to the Golden Idol games, where you'll be accumulating keywords of people, things, and events. that then must be slotted into descriptions of the incidents and their timelines. It appeared to be very involved, and I didn't come close to filling most of it in with the information I uncovered. You really have to thoroughly canvass the environment to gather every piece of potential clue, if the museum grounds are anything to go by for the full game. By the way, also similar to Golden Idol is that this seems to be set in its own distinct world, not the Earth we know. So I like the tone, and the way you go about investigating. It remains to be seen whether this mystery will be interesting, or maybe this is just the first of many mysteries in the game. The detective duo and Christopher's wife make allusions to supernatural involvement, as I said. So that's not off the table, even though the case of the man who attacked the woman in a garden doesn't necessarily read that way to me. Azaran, Islands of the Jinn, is a third-person action-adventure platformer. Scratch that, it's a Zelda-like. In fact, it's a perfect replica of the N64 era of Legend of Zelda, and I don't say that disparagingly. Though this game is homage, it's the real deal, and I thought it was a great time. I do have nostalgia for that era of Zelda, but I think this would hold up even if you never played Ocarina or Majora in your life. The story is about planes of reality. The world is inspired by Arabian Nights. You're a young hero and his magical owl companion, who gives you tutorial hints. You get a sword and shield, a bow and arrow, bombs. You can lock on. I'm just saying this stuff for the benefit of anyone who's been sealed away like Ganon since the 90s. Or the youngsters out there who have many wonders ahead. It has the combat, it has the puzzles, it has the bosses, mini and major. It has the interconnected levels. Supposedly we'll be getting a tropical overworld. And if this level of quality can be held for a full game, it's going to be top-notch. ODDCORE is a fast-paced first-person shooter with roguelike elements, set in a series of levels that are basically the back rooms as a theme park. It's manic, it's garish, it's creepypasta-coated. You have a quick-shooting handgun with a big alt-fire. You have a Rick and Morty-style portal gun that lets you shoot collected souls at the ground to heal yourself. But the souls are also the currency that buy your roguelike upgrades, so better just not to take damage. After I died to a timed level I didn't realize the stakes of, the hub has an arcade where you can play games and win tickets to buy cosmetics. But yeah, the speed of combat really keeps you on your toes. So if you like shooting at that speed, you'll probably have a good time. You can also jump around and run on walls, which you actually need to do in between combat to reach the upgrades. Overall, even though the aesthetic borrows from existing brain rot, it almost owns it in a way by being so flippant and frenetic. I still don't know that I'd seek this one out over other upcoming shooters, though. House of Necrosis is a retro survival horror inspired by Resident Evil. You know, I had to sneak one of these in here. But what's this? It's actually an RPG? It has more in common with Parasite Eve, actually? What's the world coming to? Oh wait, it's not like Parasite Eve? It's a grid-based dungeon crawler? Okay. Well, I genuinely don't know how to play this game. You're a lone survivor trying to make it through a monster-infested mansion, which takes the form of level after level of rooms with hallways. Always one exit door somewhere on the floor. You move in a grid, the enemies move in a grid, and they only move when you move. You get a knife and a gun with limited ammo, at least early on. You also get many items that can be equipment, healing, drinkable, throwables, money, and you can learn spells. The enemies all have their particular attack patterns, so lowly zombies attack one space ahead, but more advanced freaks can attack along several spaces. So you'd think you'd be managing the risk-reward of finding items in the level or on slain foes, with the safety of running away and finding the exit. But what it felt like to me is that all of the enemies in the level just beeline towards your location, which can easily result in bad situations because of how many narrow hallways there are. If you suffer an enemy to live and go around it, you'll usually find yourself trapped between it and new enemies at the next choke point. But killing everything in sight is also not really feasible. because with every enemy you'll be trading damage. It's not so bad with crows and crawlers, but as soon as the tougher enemies show up who can just chunk your health away, I don't know what the strategy is for winning those exchanges. I think there's a roguelite element of permanent progression, maybe, so maybe I'm supposed to be losing early in the early stages, and it's quite possible I just don't understand what tactics I should be employing. This might be one I look into a bit after release, to see if players have figured out how to approach it, like what mindset to have. Dracamar is a super simple, as in easy to play and family friendly, 3D platformer. I initially thought it might have monster taming elements, but actually you're just rescuing critters as your primary goal, and they can help you with platforming in various ways throughout the levels. The opening cutscene was so funny to me because it's like, the Kuroki flower is the most special thing in Dracamar, but from Draclantis, the evil King Krad is using Kuroki to create Moki balls, which turn the Okies into Mokis. They had to know what they were doing when they wrote this stuff, but I kinda love it. And that's the way I feel about the rest of the game too. Very smooth, very cute. You must have a cold heart to think ill of Dracamar. You're jumping, you're rolling, you're sliding, you're spin attacking to bop the evil out of the Okies. All the while you're collecting stars and negative energy balls, and there are a few hidden badges in each level that unlock secret levels in the overworld if you collect them. Do you turn your brain off a little? Sure, but it's a sweet kind of simple. Sometimes you just gotta defeat the hover cannon riding lizard man who's using the Kuroki's Moki balls to turn the Okies into Mokis. Alright, did anything here pique your interest? If not, I recently uploaded part 2 of my non-NextFest demo impressions on my new personal channel, so consider watching that one too. I played so many demos in the last couple months that I forget what full games are like. Next thing I know, I'll be watching only the trailers of movies, and that's a fate worse than death. So thanks for watching, while I was still myself.